All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to become database detectives. We're going to explore how patterns, hidden deep inside millions of lines of data, can tell these incredibly powerful stories about something that affects us all, fairness in lending. So, let's get right to it. Okay, so it all starts with this really simple core idea. Lending should be fair. It's supposed to be a cornerstone of economic opportunity for everyone. But what happens when the data starts telling a different story? When the patterns that bubble up from all those loan applications and approvals hint that, well, maybe fairness isn't quite so universal? That's the mystery we're unpacking today. So take a look at this. What you're seeing here isn't just a map of a city. It's a map of its financial lifeblood. All those green dots, those are loan approvals. And you can see how they're all clustered together. But the red gaps, they're just as telling. Those are areas with high denial rates, or maybe places where people have just stopped applying altogether. This kind of visual gap is a huge puzzle, and it's the job of investigators at the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or the OCC for short, to figure out exactly what it means. And that is the big question here, right? What story is this data really telling us? Is it just a collection of thousands of individual financial choices, or is it pointing to something bigger, something more systemic? Let's find out. So, our investigation really starts by understanding that this isn't some brand new story. But the way we read it, the way we find it, that has completely changed. We've moved from dusty old paper maps to complex digital patterns. Now, what's so fascinating about this is how it reframes the problem. Historically, redlining was, well, it was obvious. We're talking about actual physical red lines drawn on paper maps by banks to just wall off entire communities, calling them undesirable for loans. Today, those paper maps are gone. But the big question is, have they just been replaced by invisible lines? Lines that are coded deep inside lending algorithms, only showing up when you know how to look for them in the data? And this just perfectly illustrates this cat and mouse game of enforcement over the decades. Back in the 70s, new laws were passed to fight the really obvious, overt discrimination. Then, by the 80s, the focus shifted to that geographic redlining we just talked about. And today, the battlefield has moved again. The fight for fairness is now happening inside databases and really complex computer models. So, if the bias is hiding in the data, how in the world do you actually find it? Well, you need the right tools. So let's take a peek inside the Digital Detectives Toolkit. The whole process is super methodical. First things first, investigators gather just a mind-boggling amount of data. We're talking millions upon millions of loan records. Then comes the analysis, where they start slicing and dicing that data every which way, comparing outcomes for different groups in different neighborhoods. But the magic, the really crucial part, is that final step, identifying the patterns and anomalies that just don't make sense, finding that statistical smoke that could be pointing to a fire. And what kind of data are they looking at? It's a real mix. They use reports from the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, that's HMDA, which gives you the who and the where for every single mortgage application. They dig into the credit scoring logic to see how the decisions are being made. They even map out physical bank branches to see who has easy access to services. And then they layer all of that with census data to really understand the context of the community. All right, so they've got the tools, they've got the data, but what are the examiners actually searching for? I mean, what does a digital redline even look like when it's just a bunch of ones and zeros? It's a really interesting question to think about, isn't it? Because it's almost never going to be a single smoking gun. You're not going to find a line in the code that says, deny loan because of zip code. Instead, bias shows itself in these really subtle statistical ways. Okay, one of the most important concepts to get your head around here is something called disparate impact. This is huge. A bank could have a policy that seems totally neutral, completely fair on the surface, let's say a minimum loan amount of a certain size. But what if that policy means that almost no one from a particular minority neighborhood can ever qualify? Well, that policy has a disparate impact. The intent doesn't have to be malicious for the outcome to be discriminatory. So these examiners are basically trained to spot these specific clues, these digital red flags. They're on the lookout for pricing anomalies, like get this, 2 applicants with basically identical credit scores and incomes, but one is offered a loan at a much higher interest rate. Yeah, that's a problem. They'll analyze marketing budgets to see if some communities are being totally ignored. And of course, they still look for any evidence of outright discriminatory intent. But they also go after the models themselves, testing the algorithms to see if they spit out unfair results. This brings us to what's probably the most important part of this whole story. All this data analysis, all this digital detective work. Why does it matter so much? Why go to all this trouble? Because it all comes down to one thing, a single foundational right that so much of modern life is built on: fair access to lending. Without it, the dream of buying a home, of starting a business, of investing in your family's future, it can all just stay a dream. This entire complicated process is designed to protect that one right for every single person. And I think this quote from our source material just says it all perfectly. We tend to think of databases as these cold, impersonal collections of facts. But in this story, they become something else. They become a record of accountability. Behind every single loan decision is a database holding the story of every borrower, every rate, and yeah, every right. So I'll leave you with this thought to chew on. We've seen how data can be this powerful flashlight, shining a light on the ghosts of past injustices that are still hiding in our modern systems. So the question for all of us is, can we use that same power not just to find what's wrong, but to proactively build something better? If data can reveal our past, can it also help us write a much, much fairer future?